Ladies and gentlemen, conversations are the lifeblood of our connections. Whether at work, at home, or out in the world, every single interaction we have either builds trust or erodes it. We often think of communication as casual, as something we just do without planning. But in reality, some of the best communicators in the world are not entertainers or motivational speakers. They are people who spend their lives navigating high-stakes conversations where every word matters, where tone shapes the outcome, and where the wrong approach can ruin everything. If you want to know what it takes to speak with clarity, to persuade without pushing, and to turn tense moments into productive ones, you don't need to look at the latest self-help book or trendy TikTok advice. You can learn from one of the most pressure-filled places on earth, the courtroom. Inside those walls, words are weapons, shields, and bridges, and the techniques used there are not confined to judges, lawyers, and witnesses. They are surprisingly effective in the real world, in everyday conversations you and I have with coworkers, family members, and even strangers. The first trick is what I like to call controlling the frame. In a courtroom, attorneys know that juries and judges don't just respond to facts. They respond to how those facts are framed. If a lawyer wants a jury to think about a case in terms of fairness, they'll use words and questions that pull the jury's mind toward fairness. If they want the jury to think in terms of responsibility, they'll frame everything around responsibility. Now, apply that to everyday life. Imagine you are in a disagreement with a colleague. You can argue endlessly about who is right, or you can frame the conversation around teamwork, saying something like, "I know we both want what's best for the project, so how do we get there together?" That single reframe takes the heat out of a clash and puts both of you on the same side of the table. Or think about a difficult talk with your child. Instead of framing it as punishment, frame it as guidance. I want to help you make choices that set you up for success. The facts of the situation might not change, but the lens through which you present them changes the entire dynamic. In essence, controlling the frame isn't about manipulation. It's about steering the conversation toward a more constructive ground where people actually want to work with you rather than against you. The second trick is mastering the pause. In courtroom dramas on television, lawyers deliver fiery speeches and rattle off cross-examinations at lightning speed. But in real life, some of the most effective lawyers know that silence is often their greatest tool. After a powerful question, they stop talking. They let the silence do the work. Human beings are uncomfortable with silence, and that discomfort often makes people fill the space with honesty they hadn't planned on sharing. But beyond extracting information, silence communicates something else: composure. When you pause before responding, you signal that you are thinking, not just reacting. You show that you are confident enough not to rush. Imagine a heated conversation with a partner. They throw an accusation at you. Instead of firing back immediately, you wait 2 or 3 seconds. That pause alone changes the energy. You are no longer fighting fire with fire. You are calmly deciding how to respond. Or picture a job interview where you're asked a difficult question. Instead of stumbling over filler words, you pause, breathe, and then answer with intention. That tiny moment of stillness communicates more confidence than a stream of nervous chatter ever could. Silence is powerful because it magnifies the words that follow it. The pause makes people lean in, listen harder, and take what you say more seriously. In a world where everyone is rushing to speak, those who master the pause command attention without raising their voices. The third trick is shifting from confrontation to curiosity. In court, a lawyer who bulldozes a witness with aggression usually looks desperate or bullying. The smarter move is to ask questions that open doors. By showing curiosity, the lawyer gives the witness room to speak, often revealing contradictions or truths that serve the case. Now, think about that in your everyday conversations. How often do we approach disagreements like battles to be won? A spouse says, "You never listen to me," and the instinct is to shoot back, "That's not true." A coworker criticizes your work, and you immediately defend yourself. But what if instead of resisting, you got curious? You could respond with, "Can you tell me what makes you feel that way?" Or "What part of the project seemed off to you?" That simple shift disarms defensiveness. People expect you to push back. When you don't, when you lean into curiosity, you take the wind out of their sails and often uncover the real issue. Sometimes the argument isn't about what it seems. Sometimes your partner's frustration isn't about listening at all. It's about feeling unvalued in the relationship. Sometimes your colleague's criticism isn't about your work, but about their own stress and insecurity. Curiosity cuts through the surface and gets you to the root. And when you're curious, you also show respect. You show that the other person's perspective matters, which in turn makes them more open to hearing yours. What ties all three of these tricks together, controlling the frame, mastering the pause, and shifting to curiosity, is that they are all about creating space. Most conversations go wrong because we're too busy filling space with our own words, our own urgency, our own need to be heard. We treat dialogue like a boxing match instead of a dance. But these techniques slow everything down and make room for understanding, for clarity, and for genuine connection. Controlling the frame creates space by choosing the lens of the conversation. The pause creates space by resisting the rush to react. Curiosity creates space by letting the other person's perspective breathe. Together, they transform ordinary conversations into opportunities to build bridges instead of walls. To see how powerful these tricks are, imagine a real-world scenario many of us face. A workplace conflict. Suppose you and a coworker disagree on how to approach a project. Without these tools, the conversation might go like this: "I think your plan won't work." "Well, I think yours is unrealistic." "Why are you always so critical?" It escalates quickly and nothing gets resolved. Now, let's add the courtroom tricks. First, you control the frame. "I know we both want the project to succeed. Let's figure out the best path forward." Already, the conflict shifts from personal to collaborative. Then, when your coworker criticizes your idea, instead of snapping back, you pause. The silence shows you're not rattled and gives you time to think. Finally, instead of defending yourself, you get curious. What part of the plan worries you the most? Suddenly, the conversation changes. You're not fighting, you're problem solving, and more often than not, you'll find that people soften when they feel heard. They might even admit that their frustration was less about the plan and more about feeling excluded from the decision. These tricks turn potential landmines into stepping stones. Another scenario, family arguments. We all know how quickly family discussions can spiral, especially when emotions run high. Let's say a teenager tells their parent, "You never trust me." The natural response might be defensive. "That's not true. I do trust you." But what happens when you apply the tricks? Control the frame. "I care about you and want to keep you safe." That's where this is coming from. Master the pause. Instead of instantly reacting, take a breath and let the silence settle. Then shift to curiosity. What makes you feel like I don't trust you? The teenager, expecting a fight, might instead open up. Maybe they feel micromanaged. Maybe they're struggling to prove their independence. Suddenly, instead of an explosive argument, you're in a dialogue that builds trust rather than erodes it. Even in casual conversations, these tools shine. Picture meeting someone new at a social gathering. Instead of nervously filling the air with chatter, you can use silence intentionally. Pause, let them speak, and listen. Control the frame by steering the conversation toward mutual interests. It's great meeting people who are into creative projects. What kind of things are you working on? Use curiosity by asking genuine follow-up questions. People walk away from conversations like that feeling understood, respected, and valued, and all you did was borrow tricks from the courtroom. These tools also matter in moments of persuasion. Let's say you're negotiating a raise. Many people go in guns blazing. "I deserve this raise because I work hard." But the smarter move is to control the frame. "I'd like to talk about aligning my compensation with the value I bring to the company." That sets the conversation in terms of fairness and contribution, not entitlement. Then, when your boss gives a counterpoint, pause. Don't rush to fill the space with nervous justifications. Let the silence carry weight. Finally, if your boss resists, shift to curiosity. "What would you need to see from me to feel confident about adjusting my salary?" That turns the conversation into a problem you both can solve rather than a wall you have to climb. Suddenly, you're not demanding, you're collaborating. Think about friendships too. Misunderstandings happen all the time between friends. Someone cancels plans last minute and you feel hurt. Instead of accusing them, "You never make time for me," you control the frame, "I really value our time together." You pause instead of venting in anger. Then, you ask with curiosity, was something going on that made it hard to meet up? Maybe they're dealing with stress you didn't know about. By using these tools, you strengthen the friendship rather than letting resentment build. The beauty of these tricks is that they aren't about memorizing scripts or manipulating people. They are about being intentional with how you use your voice, your silence, and your curiosity. They work because they tap into human psychology. People respond to framing because it shapes how they interpret reality. They respond to pauses because silence commands attention and signals confidence. They respond to curiosity because at our core, we all want to feel heard and understood. These aren't gimmicks, they're universal principles that cut through noise and conflict. When you start using these courtroom tricks in your everyday conversations, you'll notice a shift. Arguments become calmer. Negotiations become smoother. Relationships become stronger. You'll find yourself less reactive and more composed. And most importantly, you'll discover that people respect you more, not because you always win the conversation, but because you make space for genuine dialogue. When we step back and look at the heart of these techniques, what they all reveal is that communication is not about dominating the other person, winning the argument, or proving a point at all costs. It is about connection. It is about creating space where honesty, understanding, and respect can live. And if there is anything these courtroom lessons teach us, it's that the best communicators are not the loudest in the room, not the most aggressive, and not the ones who memorize clever lines. The best communicators are the ones who know how to shape the environment of a conversation so that both sides can breathe. They are the ones who know when to slow down, when to let silence do the talking, and when to lean in with curiosity instead of combativeness. Think about how rarely we experience that in daily life. How often do our conversations spiral into shouting matches, cold silences, or endless cycles of misunderstanding? It's because most of us operate in reactive mode. Someone says something that pushes our buttons, and we immediately throw words back without pausing, without framing, without even stopping to ask what is really being said beneath the surface. These tricks remind us that we don't have to live in reactive mode. We can choose to step into conversations with intention. We can choose to shape the tone instead of being dragged by it. We can choose to invite honesty instead of defensiveness. And that choice is transformative, not just for the outcome of one conversation, but for the trajectory of entire relationships. When you frame the conversation in a way that builds common ground, you are telling the other person, "I see you, and I want us to move forward together." When you master the pause, you are sending the message, "I am confident enough not to rush, and I respect this moment enough to think before I speak." When you shift to curiosity, you are declaring, "Your perspective matters, and I want to understand it before I judge it." Put all of those together, and suddenly you are not just talking, you are leading. You are not just exchanging words, you are building trust. And trust, whether in the courtroom, in the office, in a marriage, or in a friendship, is the foundation on which every meaningful human connection rests. The beauty is that you don't need to wait for some perfect situation to test these skills. You don't need a stage, you don't need a robe, you don't need a jury. You can practice them right now. The next time someone interrupts you, instead of snapping back, frame your response to keep the conversation collaborative. The next time a heated argument rises, let a pause settle the fire before you add more fuel. The next time you feel accused or criticized, resist the urge to defend yourself and instead ask a curious question. These are not grand gestures, they are small choices, repeated in everyday interactions, that over time change how people see you and how you see them. And perhaps the most powerful truth is that these tools are not just about changing how others respond to you, they are about changing you. When you practice controlling the frame, you discipline your own emotions and focus on solutions. When you practice pausing, you train yourself in patience, clarity, and composure. When you practice curiosity, you grow in empathy, humility, and openness. These are not tricks in the shallow sense of the word, they are habits that sculpt your character. They make you not just a better communicator, but a better leader, a better partner, a better friend, and a better human being. So, in the end, the lesson is simple but profound. The real victories in life are not about winning arguments, shutting someone down, or proving superiority. The real victories come when you create conversations where people feel safe, heard, and respected. They come when you use your words not to wound, but to build. They come when you approach even the hardest talks with the calm of silence, the vision of framing, and the openness of curiosity. Carry these lessons with you into every conversation, and you will find that what works in the courtroom works even better in the everyday trials of life, because every conversation is a chance not to argue, not to fight, not to dominate, but to connect.